What's going on, guys? This is Matt Crohan,
I'm Robert Brimmer.
and we're here to talk about physical activity and mental health.
So the background etiology of this. So the Center of Disease Control has some facts that they've researched and published, stating that about 50% of Americans are going to develop a mental illness at some point in their life. Most of these mental illnesses are minor depression, anxiety, some kind of insomnia, but that we're all going to deal with it, or 50% of us are going to deal with it at some point, and that average adult who develops a mental illness lives an average of 25 years less than the rest of the U.S. population. So it's kind of a big deal, and that's where this research comes into play.
All right, so right now we're going to look at the impact of physical activity on mental health. So, kind of looking at it, it suggested that at least 10 minutes of physical activity kind of throughout your day can encourage and promote an active lifestyle, which can ultimately help with depression and anxiety, maybe preventing it, but for the most part, kind of just easing your mind a little bit more, kind of helping you out, trying to cope with it. Um, the association between physical activity and mental health is kind of under recognized in both children and adults. But I mean, we look at the information that we're given in the studies, and it shows that there clearly is kind of a correlation between the two, and maybe not preventing it, but helping deal with it. And then looking at the picture on the left, it shows an active brain after 20 minutes of activity, and you can kind of see um, how much blood flow there is to the brain and how much it's working after just 20 minutes of walking. So it really helps out.
All right, so one of the pieces of research that we wanted to highlight is a piece of research done that is a meta-analysis of a couple other studies that were done where they took a questionnaire, gave it to 20,000 participants with variable amounts of physical activity. Their general findings that were that a minimum amount of physical activity, so about 20 minutes per week, with the activity level being kind of variable, could help ease people that were in or lower psychological distress. All right, so where this is applicable is if you got somebody that isn't feeling really well, they're down, they're blue, something like that, just a little bit of activity every week, doesn't have to be a lot, will help that perceived psychological distress.
All right, so looking at the research dose response 2, um, the study that was performed was on 55 overweight and obese participants who were diagnosed with some form of mental illness, whether it be depression, anxiety, even something as much as schizophrenia. Um, in the study of uh, being active for at least 120 minutes per week, kind of just at that moderate physical activity level. This study found limited correlation with participants in mental symptoms based on the level of activity. So, kind of the author decided that they needed a little more research to be done, just based off of the fact that they're not sure whether physical activity really does have an impact on preventing mental health or if it just kind of lowers the symptoms, I guess you could say.
All right, so the third piece of research we want to highlight, this is a multi-study analysis of over 1,200 individuals, and it's just looking to correlate dose response and duration of exposure to physical activity in outdoor green space specifically. Their research findings saw that there was an improvement in self-esteem and mood for the younger participants. The older you got, the less there was a change. So if you're younger, then physical activity outdoors was a lot more helpful to the participants' overall well-being and self-esteem. So the younger you are, the more you need to get out into nature while being physically active. The older you are, being physically active is still helpful, but it doesn't matter as much necessarily the setting. All right. Another thing, the dose response between physical activity and mental health. Overall, there is a lot of research out there, but most of it is just looking at, is there a correlation and how much? There's not a lot. There's not a lot of clear correlation between everything right now. There needs to be a lot more research done. Some of the upper limits haven't been reached yet. Most of the studies use the CDC's 120 minutes per week, or just ask questions to the participants on whether they are active or not. And there isn't a clear scientific link between all of it. So more research needs to happen before they can clearly decide whether it's being overall helpful toward everybody. All right. So potential biological mechanisms that could be affecting people when they are active. So the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, it's a hormonal response or hormonal mechanism in your brain that is going to improve neurological health and memory. Dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter, it plays a role in happiness, and the more physically active you are, the more dopamine you're going to have in your system. Self-produced stress, there's some research that says that if you put your body under stress, that it's going to react more positively later on when you're under stress, and your body is going to know how to handle that stress later. And then activity obviously promotes a healthy sleep cycle. If you work out, after you work out, you're going to be sleepy, you're going to go to sleep, you're going to stay asleep longer, and it's going to be a better sleep. So those four things have been looked at by most all of the research we've looked at. It's very hard to test for some of these things. So again, the better the research that you can find, the better it's going to be. And not all that research exists right now, so there needs to be a lot more research done in the field.
All right, so looking at the strength of the scientific evidence, most of the research that they do is they go out and give out questionnaires and surveys to potential participants who claim to have some form of mental illness. Again, going back on some of the examples of anxiety and depression, the CDC has conducted research in the U.S. Citing that amounts of people being affected by mental illness does not correlate with most of their research to physical activity. A greater scientific understanding of the factors causing mental health issues is needed, along with a greater understanding of the psychological benefits of physical activity, which is pretty much stating they're not sure just what physical activity does for people who have these mental illnesses, whether it will prevent it or just reduce the risk of it. So ultimately, more research is needed to decide this. And then, just to wrap everything up, some of the discussion questions we've had for you guys is, what are the benefits of physical activity on people with mental health issues like depression and anxiety? And in your opinion, do you believe that physical activity can be prescribed by doctors as a method of controlling mental illnesses? And then finally, lastly, what is the greatest problem with gauging the benefit of physical activity on people with mental health problems? And then just to wrap everything up, these are the references we came up with. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you can come away with some information that's helpful.